Euro 2020 was postponed to 2021 because of the COVID-19 pandemic, making anticipation even greater than usual. The wait proved to be worth it, as football fans all over the world were blessed with a record 142 goals, and the highest goal per game ratio since the group stage was introduced over 4 decades ago. The tournament brought tears of both joy and distress, and unforgettable moments, but let's start from the beginning. Stadio Olimpico in Rome has hosted 2 Euro finals, in 1968 and 1980. 41 years later, the return here was long overdue. Even though this was not a final, the atmosphere rivaled that of one. Italy was a nation in turmoil after their failure to reach the 2018 FIFA World Cup and had only recently begun being carefully optimistic with Roberto Mancini at the helm. Their opponent Turkey went undefeated against France in qualifying and were many people's dark horses. Coach Şenol Güneş took the team to a World Cup bronze 19 years earlier and was hoping for another magical summer. But this wasn't Turkey's tournament. Merih Demiral did score the tournament's first goal. The only problem was that it was in the wrong net. Ciro Immobile extended the Azzurri's lead, and Lorenzo Insigne added another to make Italy 3-0 victors in the premier match. The match gave us a good taste of what we could expect from Italy. Turkey still couldn't find the back of the right net in their match against Wales, losing 2-0 after goals from Aaron Ramsey and Connor Roberts. And after the 3-1 debacle against Switzerland, a match where all goals were high class, the Turkish fiasco was confirmed, even though they ended their goal drought. Speaking of Wales and Switzerland, it was those two that made up Euro 2020's second match. Briel Mbolo gave Switzerland the lead, but the former bodyguard Kiefer Moore rescued a point for Wales. Moore's journey to this stage is improbable. Just 5 years earlier, he played non-league football for Torquay United. The match ultimately ended 1-1, even though the Swiss should have arguably been given a penalty for the blatant shirt pulling on Briel Mbolo. But he stood firm and remained on his feet, so no foul was given. This issue was raised again in the round of 16 between Belgium and Portugal, where João Palhinha pulled Romelu Lukaku's shirt so hard that everyone saw it, except possibly the referee. Football players should not be forced to dive in order for justice to be done. To quote pundit and former English player Gary Lineker, Lukaku being pulled back and refusing to fall down and then not getting a free kick is exactly why players dive. Referees need to reward honesty if it's to change. But the group stage also offered beacons of hope, like the aforementioned Italy. They had set the bar sky high after the emphatic performance against Turkey, a bar so high not even Gianmarco Tamberi could jump over it. However, the Italian national football team could. Their display against Switzerland was just as convincing as that against Turkey, once again winning 3-0. A new star shone this evening. Manuel Locatelli's brace and solid performance throughout the tournament means he'll unlikely stay at Sassuolo for long. Ciro Immobile also scored his second goal of the Euros. Despite the smaller goal tally, Italy were just as convincing against Wales, where Matteo Pessina announced himself. The match between Denmark and Finland could have gone down in history as Finland's first win at a major tournament. Joel Pohjanpalo could have forever engraved himself in the mind of the Finnish people. This match was remembered for an entirely different reason though, something of outstandingly greater importance. As halftime was approaching, Interstar Christian Eriksen collapsed and the whole football world held its breath. Everyone knew something was seriously wrong, and Danish and Finnish players alike fervently urged medical staff to immediately get there. Simon Kjær set an unprecedented precedent for how a captain should act, putting Eriksen in a recovery position before the medical team arrived, comforting Eriksen's terrified partner and the crying teammates together with Kasper Schmeichel. The subsequent scenes were like something from a horror movie, as the resuscitation attempts began. However, amidst the terror, there were glimpses of hope and humanity. The Danish players formed a human shield around Eriksen that, along with flags provided by both sets of fans, protected him from the many disrespectful photographers. After what felt like an eternity, Eriksen was carried out of the stadium, with his eyes open again. He was taken to Rikshospitalet, which was thankfully just 500 meters away. People began being cautiously hopeful. Finnish fans chanted Christian, to which the rest of the stadium responded Eriksen. The match was controversially resumed later that evening. It seemed the Danish players had reached this decision at first, perhaps encouraged by the recovering Eriksen through FaceTime. However, it later emerged that they were given an ultimatum by UEFA: play the match that evening or the next day at noon. Peter Schmeichel was deeply critical of the decision. Something terrible like that happens and UEFA gives the players an option to go out and play the game or come back at 12 on Sunday? What kind of option is that? Coach Kasper Hjulmand also expressed his concerns. The only real leadership would have been to put the players on a bus and send them home, and then deal with it after. With corona cases, it's possible to postpone a game for 48 hours, but with cardiac arrest, apparently it's not, and I think that's wrong. The disapproval of the decision was near universal, even though UEFA claimed they restarted the match following the request made by players of both teams. Denmark ultimately lost, but Eriksen surviving is an infinitely bigger victory. To quote Swedish journalist Erik Niva, "Apparently football was played before, and apparently football was played after. I almost don't remember it. I hardly noticed it was happening. Denmark lost, but life won." Belgium and Russia made up Group B's second match. B as in Belgium, because the Red Devils absolutely dominated this group, defeating the Russians 3-0 in their own backyard, in a match where Romelu Lukaku proved why he's so many people's favorite to win the Golden Boot. Thomas Müller also got on the score sheet. In the next match, the Belgians were poised to face a redemption-seeking Danish side in Copenhagen. Josef Poulsen gave Denmark an early lead in a half the red and white dominated. The match also offered a magnificent tribute to Eriksen. Players and fans of both teams gave a standing ovation. A beautiful sight. What was not so beautiful was the beer cups thrown at the Belgian goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois. During the first half, he probably wished the cups were still full so he could ease his nerves to cope with the Danish onslaught. Then the second half came around, and Kevin De Bruyne entered the field. His assist enabled Torgan Hazard's equalizer, and 16 minutes later, the Manchester City star's superb finish made sure Belgium were victorious. Finally, the Red Devils ultimately defeated Finland quite comfortably, despite solid defending and a great performance by one of the group stage's best goalkeeper, Lukas Radecki. Finland had previously lost 1-0 to Russia in St. Petersburg, so this spelled the end of the tournament. It was do or die for Denmark in their final group match against Russia. And do they did. After beating Russia 4-1, Denmark had been even more emphatic against Wales in the round of 16, and after their triumph against the Czech Republic in the last 8, the Danish success story seemed endless. Denmark had reached the semi-finals, after a group stage exit seemed almost inevitable. Austrian coach Franco Foda branded his team as the best in the country's history, and in the opening match against North Macedonia, it was easy to understand why. 3 well-worked goals brought them an exciting win. Austrian Marko Arnautovic, who has Serbian roots, became a little too excited after scoring his goal though, resulting in him lashing out at the Ersan Alioski and his family, who are of Albanian descent. But Arnautovic eventually did the right thing. Arnautovic and I talked after the match and clarified, as he apologized to me and came to our room and shook my hand, being very fair, Alioski told The Guardian. UEFA gave him a 1-match ban for the insult, meaning he missed the 2-0 defeat against the Netherlands. He probably didn't mind sitting that one out too much. Regardless, Austria's convincing win against Ukraine, which miraculously only ended 1-0, gave them high confidence heading into the last 16. Ukraine's match kit was another controversy, at least for Russia. The jerseys were decorated with a map of Ukraine's national borders, with Crimea included. Russia annexed the peninsula in 2014, but it's still considered part of Ukraine by the United Nations. The kits also contained the slogan, "Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes." UEFA said there was no dispute for the map of Ukraine, but ordered that the phrase should be removed, citing the following reasons. The specific combination of the two slogans is deemed to be clearly political in nature, having historic and militaristic significance. Austria may have beaten North Macedonia, but it was arguably the Balkan nation that stood for the biggest exclamation point game-wise of the match, when the 37-year-old living legend Goran Pandev scored his country's first ever goal in a championship. A noteworthy highlight in an otherwise disappointing Euro campaign for the debutants. They succumbed 2-1 to Ukraine in the following match, It could have just as easily been 2-0, since Alioski was agonizingly close to not convert his penalty, and it wouldn't have been the first. The penalty conversion rate at Euro 2020 was the worst in the history of the competition. 14 penalty kicks never found the back of the net. The Netherlands played their first major tournament since the 2014 World Cup, where they finished third, and after missing 2 consecutive championships, this was the most vindication-seeking Dutch side in years. However, their coach, Frank de Boer, was deeply criticized, and a disappointing tournament would almost certainly end his stint. Fortunately for de Boer, he got just the right start against Ukraine. A routine win, or so it seemed at first. After a goalless first half, Jorginho Wijnaldum and Wout Weghorst made it 1-0 and 2-0 respectively in rapid succession. Then Andriy Yarmolenko and Roman Jaremchuk made it 2-1 and 2-2 with an even shorter interval, the former being one of the goals of the tournament. In the end, it was the Netherlands who got the last laugh through Denzel Dumfries' late header. Another striking thing about this Dutch team was the goalkeeper, Maarten Stekelenburg. The 38-year-old hadn't played for the national team in almost 5 years until a friendly against Georgia ahead of Euro 2020. The stars aligned perfectly for him. Barcelona's Jasper Cillessen withdrawing from the Dutch squad due to contracting COVID-19, combined with Stekelenburg rejuvenating his career with a great season at Ajax, was enough to see him appear between the sticks for the national team again. Stekelenburg wasn't alone in being an unexpected goalkeeper this summer. Austria's Daniel Bachmann also belongs in that category. Bachmann frequently struggled to get playing time, even at club level, but got into shape with Watford just in time for the Euros to start, winning his second international cap only a couple of months prior. England had not won a major tournament in 55 years, and they had high hopes ahead of the Euros. Dreams of it finally coming home. Not least because they had home advantage in all group matches, and 3 out of 4 knockout ties should they reach the final. The Three Lions defeated Croatia 1-0 in their first match after a goal from Raheem Sterling. It would not be the last we saw of him, exorcising England's demons from the 2018 World Cup semi-final. Later that day, Scotland played in front of their home fans in Glasgow, their first match at a championship in 23 years. It was a special match, albeit one unworthy of such a long-awaited return. The Czech Republic made up the opposition, but they might be known as the Czech Republic henceforth. Patrik Schick opened the scoring with a superb header, but as good of a goal it was, his second made it pale in comparison. Scottish goalkeeper David Marshall was off his line, and Schick punished him in the most emphatic way imaginable. The match between Croatia and the Czech Republic was an even affair. Ivan Perisic gave the World Cup runner-ups the lead after a great individual performance, but Dejan Lovren failed to keep his elbows in check, and the bleeding Schick converted his penalty with ease. Despite the low goal tally, it was an entertaining match, which makes it even stranger that the Spanish referee blew the final whistle 20 seconds before the scheduled added time was completed. Later that evening, it was time for the greatly anticipated British derby at Wembley. The match offered decently entertaining football in the rain, but failed to produce any goals. Scotland likely considers it a victory though. England's final group match against the Czech Republic was another close encounter, but Sterling once again made sure they were victorious. It was quite an uninspired Czech side, perhaps because the winner of the group would face Germany, France or Portugal. Despite winning the group, England were not exempt from criticism, nor was their talisman Harry Kane. The fans wanted more. It was do or die for Scotland and Croatia. Both needed a win to advance. Anything less would see them eliminated. This proved to be Croatia's night. Perisic's and Luka Modric's masterclass made sure of that. But Scotland would get their own reason to celebrate. Callum McGregor scored the Tartan Army's first major tournament goal since the 1998 World Cup. Spain had struggled to find success after their Euro title in 2012. And they didn't seem any closer to finding it in their opening match against Sweden. Especially disappointing since they played in front of their home fans in Seville, and would do that throughout the group stage. La Roja didn't suffer from a shortage of chances, but they suffered from an inability to convert them. The group stage's best goalkeeper Robin Olsen's heroics was enough to rescue a point for Sweden, despite Spain having 84% possession. Historic numbers. It didn't look much better against Poland, even though Alvaro Morata ended his and Spain's goal drought. But the world's best striker, Robert Lewandowski, proved too much for La Roja. Morata's post-hit from the penalty spot summed up Spain's night. The nightmare had only just begun for the Juventus striker, receiving death threats, insults to his family, and wishes of his children dying. Morata had this to say: "I did not sleep for 9 hours after the game against Poland. I understand that I am criticized because I have not scored a goal. but I wish people would put themselves in the place of what it is like to receive threats, that they tell you that your children should die. What bothers me is that they tell my wife, that they tell my children, they tell them everything. Spain's coach Luis Enrique didn't hesitate to defend Morata, despite his lack of goals. We have much faith in Morata. Coaches have access to information that journalists and supporters do not. I have said things about him to give him confidence, but also because he does many important things for the team. Spain was winless after 2 matches, just like Poland. The White and Reds got a nightmare start against Slovakia, conceding an unfortunate own goal that would have done a greater justice being attributed to Robert Mak after his great individual performance leading up to it. Poland got the best start imaginable in the second half, equalizing after only a few seconds. Then Krychowiak got his second yellow card, and the game slipped out of Poland's hands. Slovakia made full use of the extra man and won 2-1. Sweden kept on impressing after holding Spain to a draw, winning 1-0 against this underappreciated Slovakian side, thanks to an Emil Forsberg penalty, the same side Poland failed to beat. Now the two stood against each other in a Baltic Sea derby on matchday 3. It took Forsberg almost 77 minutes to find the back of the net against Slovakia. He didn't need nearly as much time against Poland, scoring the tournament's fastest goal after just 82 seconds. 14 minutes into the second half, the RB Leipzig winger doubled Sweden's lead, and they appeared to be heading towards a comfortable win. Then Lewandowski showed why he's the best striker in the world. His brace ultimately only served as consolation though, as Viktor Claesson won it for Sweden in the dying minutes. Spain and particularly Morata's ordeal continued against Slovakia, missing another penalty. Fortunately for him, this was overshadowed by one of the tournament's most bizarre own goals. Slovakian goalkeeper Martin Dubravka accidentally punched the goal into his own net when trying to clear it. Despite going down as an own goal, it would have been fairer to award it to the Sun. This was the beginning of the end, as La Roja soared to a 5-0 demolition. 5 different goal scorers, but not one of them was Morata.
Hungary is a sleeping giant of international football, dreaming of once again being the greatest team in the world like during parts of the 1950s. Few people cherish this dream as much as Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban. His first foreign trip as the PM was to the 1998 World Cup final, and it's said he occasionally watches as many as 6 matches per day. It's no coincidence that Orban's regime has invested £2 billion in Hungarian football, 460 million of which were spent on the Puskás Arena, the only Euro stadium with full capacity. This meant the Magyars would play in front of over 50,000 home fans in their matches against Portugal and France. Despite their ambitions and support from the stands, Hungary seemed destined to be the whipping boys in the group of death. But their start against reigning European champions Portugal was unexpectedly solid. It even seen Szabolcs Schön secured Hungary a historic and sensational win as the last 10 minutes were approaching. However, he was offside, and the Budapest frenzy ended faster than it began. Then Portugal seemed to realize they have a title to defend, winning after 3 late goals, 2 of which were scored by the tournament's eventual top goalscorer, Cristiano Ronaldo. Not only that, after the match he was also the top goalscorer in the history of the competition. The Juventus striker crushed Hungarian hearts faster than he crushed Coca-Cola's advertising revenue by removing their bottles at a press conference prior to the match. That's at least a popular belief, but it's untrue. In reality, there had already been a fall accounting for a majority of the share price reduction before the press conference, and other factors may have also contributed to the drop. Later that evening, reigning world champions France were poised to take on Germany in Munich. However, the match was delayed briefly due to a Greenpeace activist with a paramotor. He got stuck on a rope during the flight, started descending, and injured a couple of people in the stands before landing on the pitch. Then it was time for kickoff. France and Germany met in the 2014 World Cup quarter-final, where Die Mannschaft won thanks to a Mats Hummels goal. This time Le Bleu won, also thanks to a goal by Hummels, one of the championship's 11 own goals, historically many. The proportions reached its peak during the match between Portugal and Germany. The Germans won 4-2, but 4 of the goal scorers were Portuguese. Own goals or not, it was an emphatic display by Die Mannschaft. Germany were seemingly rejuvenated after their fiasco at the previous World Cup, which was a big talking point. Another hot topic was Manuel Neuer's captain's armband in rainbow colors, used to show support with the LGBT community. UEFA started an investigation, but ultimately didn't impose a penalty on Neuer. They assessed the armband as a team symbol for diversity and a good cause. Hungary were eager to make the most of their last match in Budapest against France. Le Bleu played well, but they suffered from one key problem: bluntness. A problem Attila Fiola perfectly capitalized on when he gave Hungary the lead in the dying minutes of the first half. Euphoria ensued, of which one reporter in particular became aware, as her table was smashed. Thankfully, she also saw the funny side of it and raised her arms in celebration. The celebrations were cut short after an Antoine Griezmann equalizer, but it's still a historic point for the Magyars. Hungary's last group match was against Germany in Munich, a tie whose build-up was drenched in drama. The Munich City Council applied to have the Allianz Arena be illuminated in rainbow colors as a sign of tolerance and diversity. UEFA viewed the action as a protest against a law passed by the Hungarian parliament that limits young people's information rights concerning gender transitioning and homosexuality. UEFA aims to be religiously and politically neutral, and rejected the illumination proposal on those grounds. Despite the political turmoil off the pitch, the match is still mostly remembered for what unfolded on it. Adam Szalai gave Hungary another shocking lead early on. Kai Havertz didn't equalize until far into the second half, but just as the German celebrations were settling, Andras Schäfer made it 2-1 Hungary, a result that would see Germany eliminated and the Magyars advance from the group of death against all odds. Leon Goretzka saved the Mannschaft from another debacle though, equalizing in the 84th minute. It wasn't the only 2-2 match of the evening. Given how Hungary performed, they would have probably advanced from any other group, but not the group of death. Ronaldo gave Portugal the lead with a penalty against France. Then another superstar announced himself from 11 meters. Karim Benzema had not won an international cap since 2015 ahead of the Euros. Either way, he was instrumental against Portugal and rescued France a crucial point. He later made it 2-1 after a stunning pass from Paul Pogba, but another Ronaldo spot kick denied Le Bleu revenge for their 2016 Euro final loss.
Italy had emerged as the tournament's front-runner, but one would be forgiven for forgetting that in their match against Austria. Despite the Azzurri's early domination, Austria got more into the match as it progressed. It even looked like Marko Arnautovic achieved an astounding upset, but he was narrowly offside, like so many before him this summer. Extra time loomed, where Federico Chiesa and Matteo Pessina stepped up. Sasa Kalajdzic's late diving header merely served as consolation. The Netherlands were close to flawless thus far and were widely expected to manage a routine win against the Czech Republic, despite the latter's adequate group stage performance. The match was even, at least for the first 54 minutes. Then it took a distinctly Czech turn following Matthijs de Ligt's red card. Tomáš Holeš made it 1-0 and the eventual joint top goalscorer Patrik Schick added a second. Belgium and Portugal could have just as easily faced off in the final. But instead of fighting for the trophy, they'd have to settle with competing over a place in the quarterfinals. After a hesitant first half, Torgan Hazard's opening goal gave the match a healthy injection. Portugal eventually took over, but Belgium defended their lead excellently. The reigning champions were already eliminated. So far, the knockout stage had been quite solid in terms of entertainment and drama. Then what became known as Magic Monday came around, and made everything up until this point pale in comparison. Magic Monday started with the tournament's best young player, Pedri, scoring one of the most remarkable own goals in the history of the competition, even though goalkeeper Unai Simon is more to blame. Believe it or not, this was ultimately overshadowed by everything else that unfolded. Pablo Sarabia equalized, and the veteran Cesar Azpilicueta restored order when he gave Spain the lead. Then Ferran Torres made it 3-1, and La Roja's quarter-final ticket appeared to be sealed. But Mislav Orsic's 85th minute goal bestowed Croatia hope. Hope that turned into delirium when Mario Pasalic made it 3-3. Temporary delirium, because Spain reigned supreme during extra time. Morata exorcised his demons and Mikel Oyarzabal squashed any hope of another Croatian comeback. Reigning world champions France were waiting for the opening goal against Switzerland, and it came in the 15th minute. Haris Seferovic put French football in jeopardy. Early in the second half, Ricardo Rodriguez had the chance to double this lead, but Hugo Lloris kept France in the game, and Le Bleu began taking over, culminating in Karim Benzema scoring one of the fastest braces in the history of the Euros, from almost being 2-0 down to leading 2-1, just like that. Paul Pogba granted France a 3-1 lead with his stunning long shot. It wasn't nearly as long as his goal celebrations though. You might wonder what was going on inside the head of Seferovic when being 2 goals down, but he made it 3-2 with his frontal bone. Earlier in the tournament, Mario Gavranovic had a late goal disallowed for offside. This time he was on the right side. 3-3 and extra time for the second time that day. The additional 30 minutes failed to produce any goals. In the end, Jan Sommer's heroics granted Switzerland a staggering win. The world champions were eliminated. Longtime rivals England and Germany faced off at Wembley in one of the round of 16's most anticipated battles. Tensions were extra high since the Football Association threatened to ban English fans that chanted 10 German bombers. Originally sung by British schoolchildren during World War II, it was later adopted by English football fans at matches against Germany. UEFA and the FA considered the chant to be discriminatory. The match itself was also characterized by tension game-wise, but this changed when Raheem Sterling scored his and England's 3rd goal of the tournament. On top of this, Harry Kane finally ended his goal drought and sent the nation into a mania. Sweden were slight favourites ahead of the match, but it was still Ukraine that obtained the lead thanks to Manchester City's Oleksandr Zinchenko. Sweden's gem, Emil Forsberg, brought the yellow and blue back into the match right on the stroke of half-time. One of the yellow and blue sides. During the second half, Forsberg tested the solidity of Ukraine's goal frame by hitting the post and the bar, but it wasn't meant to be. Ukraine also played well and had noteworthy chances. Extra time was on the horizon though. Although evenly matched first, the game slipped out of Sweden's hand when Marcus Danielsson was sent off. Ukraine made full use of the extra man, and won in the dying seconds of the match thanks to Artem Dovbyk. Sweden's loss was perhaps a blessing in disguise, because England completely decimated Ukraine 4-0 in the quarterfinals. Kane's brace proved the doubters wrong, and gave him immense confidence heading into the semi-finals and hypothetical final. Harry Maguire and Jordan Henderson also got on the scoresheet, in their biggest win of the championship. Especially impressive since it was the Three Lions' first Euro match away from home. The victors of Magic Monday, Spain and Switzerland, met in St. Petersburg. Depending on who you ask, either Jordi Alba or Denis Zakaria gave Spain the lead in the 8th minute. It officially went down as an own goal though. Spain were uncharacteristically underwhelming and opted more for safe alibi football rather than offense and expanding their lead. This was punished by Xherdan Shaqiri, who equalized. However, Spain was given a great opportunity to clinch victory 11 minutes later, when Remo Freuler got a harsh straight red by the English referee. But they couldn't, and it remained 1-1 for the rest of the match, including extra time. Jan Sommer had a great match, but Spain was still a little more clinical during the penalty shootout. Belgium once again played in a match that could have just as well been the final. This time the opposition was Italy. The match was entertaining and energetic, and it didn't take long for goals to be attained. Nicolo Barella scored the first, and Lorenzo Insigne doubled the Azzurri's lead in the 44th minute with a goal of pure class. One would think that such a late goal prevented Belgium from scoring in the first half, but Romelu Lukaku's penalty found the back of the net in the dying seconds. That's the only goal the Red Devils scored though. The second half didn't churn out any more goals, and Italy won 2-1. The semi-final between Italy and Spain started off energetically, but calmed down after a few minutes. A skill Gianluigi Donnarumma would also have to master, after a couple of failed goal kicks almost gifted Spain the lead. In the end, those failures may have actually instead enabled the Azzurri to get in front, because Donnarumma's throw in the 60th minute was instrumental to the Italian counterattack succeeding, as was Federico Chiesa's impeccable finish. Despite dominating possession, La Roja failed to convert it into any goals. until the 80th minute, when Morata proved his doubters wrong once and for all by becoming Spain's all-time leading goalscorer at the Euros. Extra time was inevitable. Federico Bernardeschi was the last player to enter the pitch, Italy's 6th substitution. It was the first time UEFA had permitted so many substitutions at a tournament, a decision reached a few months before the final to help players cope with the fixture congestion brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Bernardeschi proved to be an excellent replacement, scoring clinically in the penalty shootout, one of many solid Italian penalties, and a solid, to say the least, performance by Donnarumma, who took Italy to the final, despite them being shrouded in doubt ahead of the championship. Few countries, if any, can claim they have a positive competitive record against England at Wembley. Denmark is one of them, or was, having defeated the Three Lions as recently as in October of 2020. But the stakes were different now. A Euro final was in the prize pool. Some English fans booed the Danish national anthem, a recurring problem during the tournament. A few even set off fireworks. English fans weren't the only perpetrators, but as the country with the most matches played at home, they were the most noticeable. Denmark got a surprisingly good start against England, holding their own for a long time. The Three Lions were beyond motivated to reach their first final since 1966, and eagerly awaited the opening goal. And it came in the 30th minute. Mikkel Damsgaard once again blessed Denmark with a remarkable strike. This time it was a free kick. One that some people claim should have been disallowed due to Danish strikers not keeping an appropriate distance from the wall, thus potentially blocking out the English goalie's, Jordan Pickford's, view. But given how vigorously Damsgaard struck the ball, it's doubtful it made any difference. England fought back and equalized thanks to a Simon Kjær own goal that would have done greater justice being attributed to Raheem Sterling, their best player of the tournament. He'd soon be in the spotlight again. This deadlock could not be broken in 90 minutes. As the first half of extra time was nearing its end, Sterling fell in the penalty area after a light touch from Joachim Mähle. He arguably started descending before contact was made though. There was no hesitation from the Dutch referee. The talismanic Harry Kane stepped up to take it. England's priceless gem, as the commentator Peter Drury had called him. Kasper Schmeichel saved Kane's initial spot kick, but England's priceless gem converted the rebound. It was a goal shrouded in controversy for more than one reason. Several pundits criticized the decision, one of them being Jose Mourinho. He expressed his concerns with the penalty decision, despite also praising England for their performance. It's never a penalty. The best team won. England deserved to win. England was fantastic, but for me it's never a penalty. A view shared by the English match official, Mark Clattenburg, who also explained why VAR didn't overturn the decision. I don't think the tackle warranted a spot kick in such a key moment. The Danes will argue it was hard, but it wasn't a clear and obvious error. Furthermore, Danish goalie Schmeichel had a laser pointed at him before the decisive penalty was taken. The search for the culprits was unsuccessful. In total, UEFA fined the FA £25,630 for the various incidents. Controversies aside, England had done great to reach their first Euro final ever. It's important we don't let bad apples in the stands taint the reputation of innocent players on the pitch. It was the perfect final, the best offense against the best defense. Two traditional football powers eager to redeem themselves in a final hosted by one of the participating countries. People could hardly contain their excitement, and some definitely couldn't contain it. More specifically, the fans without tickets fighting with police and stewards, trying to power their way past barriers to get into Wembley Stadium before the match even began. But everything was back in order when the opening whistle sounded, order that didn't last very long, as Luke Shaw gave England the lead in the second minute and sent the fans into a frenzy. The tournament's best player, according to the legendary former player Roberto Carlos, gave the Three Lions a dream start. It was a final characterized by passion and high energy. A second goal almost seemed inevitable, a fact proven by Leonardo Bonucci when he equalized in the 67th minute. Neither the remaining 23 minutes or extra time could resolve the stalemate. Round 1 of the shootout didn't bring any casualties, with Domenico Berardi and Kane both converting their penalties. Next, Pickford did an excellent save of Andrea Belotti's kick, and after Harry Maguire converted the subsequent penalty, England seemed destined to win. Bonucci scored earlier in the match and also proved clinical from 11 meters, keeping the Italian dream alive. Then Marcus Rashford endangered the English dream by hitting the outside of the post. Bernardeschi's ensuing penalty relocated the pressure to England and 21-year-old Jadon Sancho. This time it was Donnarumma's turn to be a hero, just like in the semi-final. Jorginho was arguably the best penalty taker in the world, making Pickford's save even more impressive, but it ended up being in vain. Gareth Southgate had decided Bukayo Saka was to take England's final penalty. No one can blame the 19-year-old for crumbling under the pressure. But above all, England's shootout loss can be attributed to a stunning display by the tournament's best player, Gianluigi Donnarumma. Italy were European champions for the first time since 1968. Marcus Rashford, Bukayo Saka, and Jadon Sancho were targeted by online racist abuse after missing their penalties against Italy. It was widely condemned. But despite all its flaws, Euro 2020, or 2021 if you prefer, should be remembered as a tremendous success.